The team that I think was the most obvious is the Houston Texans, though.
Ah.
We started in the NFC. That's good. It's not just AFC teams. But the Houston Texans are probably the most obvious, most improved team this offseason, right? I mean, it's in part because you know what C.J. Stroud did as a rookie. So you know, okay, we're in year 2 of C.J. Stroud, and we need to build around him. We've got that rookie contract to build around. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to trade for Stephon Diggs. I know we lost Jonathan Grenard, but may have upgraded with Danielle Hunter coming in to play opposite Will Anderson. So the Texans have to be on this list here because they're going to be everyone's darling, bring in Joe Mixon, everyone's darling to be the next team to go up and challenge the Chiefs, the Bills, the Ravens, the Bengals, the teams that have been near the top and fighting for the AFC Championship the last couple of years.
Their approach has been really interesting because they've made the kind of moves that they would be talked about all-in moves if there was more of a track record there. Like if this was the second or third year that the Texans had been playoff bound, if they were like the Bills, right? And the Bills had made these moves, you're like, Buffalo's going all in to try and get over that hump. They've made those types of moves. Like they've voluntarily gotten older and more expensive at multiple positions in the kind of this is the guy that puts us over the hump move. Only they just encountered the hump like last year. They've only just seen the hump for the first time. It's not like a hump that they've consistently not been able to get over. It's like this thing has only just loomed on the horizon into view, and they're like, we're going to need more reinforcements to get over that. They're like planning before they've arrived at this thing. So they go and get Danielle Hunter as opposed to Jonathan Grenard. It's a kind of interesting approach, and Stephon Diggs as well. You don't usually see a team, number one, that has the advantage of that rookie sort of quarterback deal very early on. Number two, that only just sort of arrived on the scene as this up-and-coming side, throw that much at this sort of short-term an approach, particularly the Diggs thing. I mean, Danielle Hunter is still in his prime, but that one only looks strange when you view it through the prism of letting go Jonathan Grenard to bring in Danielle Hunter. You had a guy that was pretty good and productive and
but
young.
He was hitting free agency. It's not like you really had him.
No, I understand. Well, you had him under contract, and then you could have gotten him. You could have signed him long term for a fraction of the deal that Danielle Hunter signed before you got to free agency. Is what I'm saying. So there was a conscious approach there of we're probably going to let this guy walk, and instead we'll bring in a much more expensive and more productive, to be fair, older player. So I don't know quite what to make about how aggressive they've been with this. We can win this year.
Well, let's not have short memories here, Sam. We were the ones sitting here 4 years ago in 2 back-to-back off seasons say, what are the Texans doing? Why are they just why are they just signing backups? Why are they just signing rotational players? They were in limbo with the Deshaun Watson contract. Then they trade Deshaun Watson to the Browns. And of course, that's one of their big opportunities. And I'm sure they looked at, as critical as I was about the Will Anderson trade and everything, I'm sure they were looking at all this extra draft capital that they got for one Deshaun Watson and said, okay, we're able to be a little bit more aggressive for guys like Will Anderson and to make those moves. I didn't read or listen to it exactly, but I saw the rankings on Twitter, so that's how you do things, right? You just saw the headline, let's respond.
Yeah.
But Kev Cole, former PFFer, and rest in peace, and Ben Baldwin went through and they ranked the front offices every year, and I think they put the Texans in the bottom 5 this year. They put them low. And again, without listening, I'm just gonna guess.
Yeah.
Right. That's how you do things here. They're both very process oriented, and I assume that they're looking at the Houston Texans process and saying, okay, do they deserve credit for C.J. Stroud? So there's a lot of the analytics folks who would look at decisions and say, do the Lions deserve credit for drafting Aiden Hutchinson? That was the obvious, right? Well, in the Texans, they just happened to be the number 2 pick that year. Who knows if they actually would have drafted Bryce Young if they had the number 1 pick. But they had the number 2 pick. The Panthers made the decision for them, and the consensus pick was C.J. Stroud. They made the decision that was correct. And then they gave up 3 high draft picks for Will Anderson. And so is their process actually sound in how they got here? And that's probably the criticism there. I don't think I'm not So my point is, I disagree with. I'm not necessarily going to go down that path, that they are not doing a good job and just kind of stumbled into this. I think that once they realized, whether they stumbled upon C.J. Stroud or not, and were aggressive to go get Will Anderson, I like that they've been aggressive this offseason. It has offset, and when they were making all those non-aggressive moves, here's our special teamer, here's Desmond King who's going to play in the slot, and they were spending $4 to $6 million for 20 players. I do think there was some culture shift in there. I do think there was, some long-term thought into some of those moves. Maybe not like those guys are a part of the team right now, but just kind of resetting things in Houston. So I want to give them credit for that, whether they deserve it or not, and give them credit for going and getting Stephon Diggs. Call me, I like shiny objects, but Stephon Diggs, to go with what Nico Collins and Tank Dell showed last year, and Noah Brown, former top recruit, who looked like a stud at times with C.J. Stroud. So I think the Texans deserve credit for, after whether they were lucky or not to get Stroud, now realizing the moment, realizing the 3-year window that they have, and going after it.
You see they traded for Ben Skoranek as well? I meant to text Bobby about that, because that just struck me as quite a funny trade.
Well, they need a fullback.
Right.
They
fullback
need a receiver who can play fullback.
The trade, wide receiver.
It was one of those, like, this is the minimum we could possibly trade, right? Because it was Skoranek and like a 7.
It was a swap of
2026 7.
It was a 6 to a 7, but it might have been 2. It might have been moving down in both the 6th and the 7th.
I just saw Skoranek in a 7 for a 6.
Okay, so the way the tweet I saw was worded could have been either moving down in 2 different consecutive rounds, or it could have been swapping a 6th for a 7th. Either way, it's not much.
Where does he fit in on
the other move, by the way, that they made that's a very sort of short-term-ish move is Joe Mixon, a running back.
And Mixon, yeah.
So, I'm not saying any of these are bad moves at all, and in fact, I think all of them made them better, but at least 2 of those moves, Danielle Hunter, Stephon Diggs, and Joe Mixon, seem like quite short shelf life moves for a team that expects to be good for the next several years. The window for them, such as these things exist, just opened, right? CJ Stroud rocks up. He's amazing. Will Anderson's good. You just nail 2 picks. Window starts to open. What they've done is let's throw as much at this window as possible. Cram everything through the window while it's open. Quick, Mixon, Diggs, shove it all through.
That's the point, but the window's not going to close, even if you do overpay or Hunter regresses over the next couple of years and Diggs is really only a 1-year option. You have money to play with heading into the 25 season as well. You have
but compare
the window's
this
open, man.
But compare this approach to how the Lions are doing things, right? They have sort of very steadfastly avoided those types of moves. They've gone, no, we want everything we do wants to be in the optimal zone to try and keep this window open for as long as possible, as opposed to let's shove as much through the window as now that it's open as we can. It's just, I'm not saying either of these things is right or wrong. It's just these are 2 interesting, contrasting approaches to what appears to be a similarly opening Super Bowl window.
So, Steve over here, third person. Steve has a short memory too. I may have copy and pasted my same take from the Chargers after they realized they had Justin Herbert, and then then it's like, oh, we're going to trade for Khalil Mack and we're going to load up and hasn't necessarily worked out, but I still like that approach. I think that's the way to go.
Okay.
Even if it didn't work for the Chargers, off the top of my head.
All right.
Teams that have tried.